I'm sorry, apologies. Good afternoon. It's been one of those days today. Good afternoon. I want to welcome all of you to the Senate Rules Committee. We have quite an agenda today, but we're going to try to be as efficient as possible. Want to make sure we get everyone's testimony, but again, I want to be as efficient as possible. I know we have a lot of folks with a lot of questions here today. Let's establish a quorum. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senators Berryhill? Here. Berryhill here. Leyva? Here. Leyva here. Mitchell? Here. Mitchell here. Canella? Here. Canella here. DeLeon?
Here.
DeLeon here.
We've established a quorum. Why don't we go to file item number 1. Colleagues, we're going to skip over right now file item number 2. We're going to go to file item number 1, and then we'll go 3 through 7. 3 through 7. Can I get a motion? We have a motion made by Ms. Mitchell. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senators Berryhill? Aye. Berryhill aye. Leyva? Aye. Leyva aye. Mitchell? Aye. Mitchell aye. Canella? Aye. Canella aye. DeLeon?
Aye.
DeLeon aye.
Motion passes 3 through 7 on a 5-0 vote. Thank you very much, colleagues. Let's go to file item number 2, which are the appointments before us, the governor's appointments. We will take on first the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, and that is Ms. Genevieve Shiroma. Ms. Genevieve Shiroma, please, welcome. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Why don't we start off? Introduce yourself. Well, before you introduce yourself, actually, if there are any friends, family, or loved ones that you'd like to introduce, please do so. And then you can make a statement, and then we'll dive into it, okay?
All right. Thank you so much, Chairman. Yes, I do have several family members and some colleagues here. Very quickly, my husband, Michael Abbott, is here. My dad, David Takeo Shiroma, is here. My stepson, Damian Abbott, is here. Good friend, Petra Sullivan, is here. And my colleagues on the board, Chairman Bill Gould, and board member Catherine Rivera Hernandez, and the General Counsel, Julie Montgomery.
Okay, fantastic. Why don't we go into your statement, then we'll go to a Q&A or commentaries from the members.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairman DeLeon and members of the Rules Committee. I am deeply honored to appear before you today for consideration for confirmation. It has been a privilege to serve these past 17 years on the board. During this time, I've deliberated on many cases involving issues ranging from representation elections to bargaining issues, as well as cases involving employee concerted activity, jurisdictional questions, and remedial issues such as back pay and bargaining make-whole. In each case that comes before me, I consider the applicable law, what the administrative law judge has ruled, the findings of fact, and the arguments of the parties. In each case, looking to the Act and past case law, I deliberate with the rule of law as my guidepost. I made a point of attending agricultural economic seminars and conferences, seeing agricultural operations firsthand. Each time, I have renewed appreciation for the magnificent complexity and diversity of California agriculture and its people. If I am confirmed, I will build upon my years of experience and continue to apply the rule of law. I thank you for this opportunity and would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shiroma. Why don't we start with questions, commentaries from the members. We'll start with Mr. Berryhill.
I get to start it off, huh? Well, welcome, and thanks for coming by the office the other day. We had a good, frank conversation. I am going to rehash some of those questions just to get you on record. You bring quite a coalition of folks, both for and against you today. This was under all of our doors earlier today of opposition, for your confirmation today. But that being said, I've been here in the legislature for about 9 years, and even though I'm new on this Rules Committee, I don't think I've seen the opposition in my 9 years here that I've seen on your confirmation here today from the industry. Just thinking and claiming that they feel you're very biased. That being said, we had a very good conversation the other day, but the farmers I've talked with indicate they believe there's been a heavy bias against them and for the unions over the last 5 years. And a couple of the guys that I talked with said that they saw kind of a transformation. They thought that 5 years ago that you were willing to work with them on a regular basis, and since then, you've been very biased towards the union. So I guess, how do you answer that charge?
Senator, I assure you, as I've assured others who have watched this, my work, whether it's the last 5 years, the 133 published decisions that have my name to them, the administrative orders that I've worked on, over 270, reflect a rule of law, reflect a careful consideration. The nature of the work is that there's a screening that occurs, an administrative law judge conducts a hearing. Those decisions from the administrative law judge are appealed to the board. We deliberate. If someone is unhappy with our decision, they're appealed to the district courts of appeal. Our record, my record, is good. We have been affirmed in over 90% of those decisions. These past 5 years, I've kept an open door. I've been accessible. I've attended as many farmer and grower association activities as I could, took in tours of agricultural operations, and have always looked to be very clear as to why a ruling went this way or that way in those published decisions.
Yeah, thank you. Can you provide me with, or the board here, with specific examples of you and the board showing a balanced perspective? I mean, how many cases have you ruled with the farmers?
Over time, I don't have a specific number count for you, but let me give you some examples. And the reason why we don't go with percentages of this way or that way is because each case that comes before us is unique, different, but with the underlying foundation of the law based on the National Labor Relations Act and then our act. In recent years, there was a case where there was an election and the employer argued that there were workers who worked off-site, that they were agricultural workers. The union argued that they were not, and in evaluating the workers' status, we ruled that they were indeed agricultural workers and their ballots were opened. Okay? There was another case, which employee is a supervisor or is not a supervisor. There again, we had arguments on both sides, and that, by the way, is the way the board works. There are the judge's decision appealed to the board. There are arguments on all sides. We weigh everything. We rule. In that particular case, there were arguments as to whether or not specific employees were supervisors or not. We ruled, based on National Labor Relations Board case law, that they were not supervisors, therefore they were allowed to vote.
So you would argue that it's been a very balanced approach, because there's plenty out here that would disagree with that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit here, and I want to talk a little bit about Richie Ross and your relationship, your political relationship with him. In fact, he has been your paid consultant in your SMUD races throughout the years. Mr. Ross, as you know, is a registered lobbyist employed by the UFW and, in fact, lobbies the ALRB. Is this not a conflict of interest, in your opinion?
It is not. The campaign activities for my SMUD board are separate and do not overlap with my Agricultural Labor Relations Board activities. These are moments in time in terms of putting together a campaign flyer. These accusations, what have you, were lodged with the board through a case that has been before us, the Growan farming decertification case. These accusations were lodged by the decertification petitioner. And as we processed the decision, there again, based on longstanding practice of the administrative law judge ruling after many days of hearing, testimony, and so forth, that decision being appealed to the board, arguments on all sides, including this petition, and in analyzing that against the standards by which I am weighed, the evidence that was provided, the arguments made, the board concluded that that petition would be denied, that there was no conflict in terms of a financial interest on my part. I have not had a financial gain, and there was no evidence showing a bias reflected in the decisions. And the decisions are published. That Growen decision is also published. Those arguments that were made and the resolution of those arguments are contained in that published decision.
So you don't believe that you compromised your ability to be impartial by your relationship with Mr. Ross?
I am absolutely certain I'm not compromised. I am absolutely an honorable person, Senator.
Well, and I'm not saying that you aren't, but I am saying that the perception out there with your track record, certainly with the people that oppose you, they would have me believe that that you are influenced by Mr. Ross. And that line goes around the block, as you know, as I looked into this thing. Now that you brought up the Growen matter, when you had a chance to recuse yourself from that Growen matter, why didn't you do so?
Once again, the common theme here that I want to share is longstanding law, standards, case law. When these sorts of allegations are put forth to the board handles it within a decision. The standard, I know there's a standard that is cited in the opposition letter. It is not the correct standard. We are governed by Part 4.5, not Part 5. It is not unusual at all. In fact, it is longstanding practice that I would not recuse myself, that the board rules, and it's not uncommon. Well, for example, even our administrative law judges who have a different standard, but they themselves, if they are asked to recuse themselves, what have you, they rule. Okay? So it is a normal practice for the full board to deliberate and rule.
Well, you know, I just think that with your relationship with Mr. Ross, that the appearance of a conflict of interest is certainly there, and there's certainly folks out there that thought that you should have recused yourself on that vote. And I'm down to just a couple more questions. On the Growen matter, it's constitutionally, it's clear that all votes are cast by a voter shall be counted. Can you explain to me why the ballots have not been counted in that Growen case when it's a basic American right? And I will tell you before you answer that I have been to the Growen packing house and talked to many of those packers in there, and all they wanted, win, lose, or draw, they wanted those votes to be counted. And yet the board, in its ultimate wisdom, seemed to, I think they shredded the vote.
No, they are not shredded, Senator.
Oh, you still have them?
So
why, can you tell me why they shouldn't be counted?
Yes, certainly. Once again, based on longstanding procedures at the National Labor Relations Board and also with the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, when you have an election where there are charges filed in the lead up to the election that allege employer assistance to the decertification effort, the standard practice in our case law and in national case law is to hold the election, impound the ballots, and litigate after. And especially in the agricultural setting, when there's a 7-day election, There is the ending of the peak employment. These are all requirements for an election in the agricultural setting. Then the ballots are impounded by the procedures, which are contained, again, both nationally and with the ALRB, and then litigate and then determine what was the outcome. In the ground matter, we have a published decision, which is on appeal, okay? But our published decision, the final ruling of the board, is to affirm the judge. And the administrative law judge said that, in fact, there was employer assistance, which is not allowed in a decertification election when you have a certified union at the property.
But can you see why there are folks out there that cry bias when you've got literally thousands of workers that simply want their votes counted, and you've got, you know, one UFW person that says there's a conflict, and you're going to hold the whole thing up over that? You can see why all of a sudden people say that this appears to be a very biased decision.
Senator, in labor relations with the Agricultural Labor Relations Act, that relationship between the certified union and the employer is established through case law. And as with the Growan case, when you have an employer who has provided assistance to the petitioner who is working to get rid of the union, that is a violation of the act. Meanwhile, it is up on appeal, and when a decision is up on appeal, the ballots are, there is a chain of custody, secure locked location, and nothing happens to those ballots till it is fully resolved. If we are sustained in the appeals court, then there is a record retention process for any records. So at this point, we are standing by to see what happens in the appeals court.
Okay, last question. The ALRB, under your watch, spends almost 40% of its budget going after one farmer and its workers. And by all accounts, that union abandoned those workers 25 years ago. How can we justify spending so much taxpayer money to force them into a union contract that I'll tell you, the many that I talk to just simply don't want it?
So, Senator, I've seen those figures. I don't know where those numbers come from. The board continues to operate as it always has in terms of processing decisions. We do not have a backlog with our decisions. We are managing our caseload. The general counsel, activities in terms of complaints going forward, going to hearing. There are many, many different types of cases. So I haven't been able to verify those numbers. And I assure you, the case was dealt with in the same manner as we have dealt with all other cases that have come before the board.
Well, this seems just a little bit over the top to me. And I certainly, along with a lot of farming groups out there, have some concerns today, but I certainly wish you the best. And that's the end of my questions, Mr. Pro Tem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berryhill. Ms. Leyva? Ms. Leyva.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Good afternoon, Ms. Shiroma. Thank you very much for being here. I do have a couple questions, but before that, I just want to make a couple comments. As someone who spent 20 years in the labor movement, either as the president of my union or the president of the California Labor Federation, it was my honor to represent working women and men. Now, I understand on the board, your position is a little different. You are unbiased, and you have to look at the law and make your decision accordingly. In looking at your record, I do not feel the way that others feel, that you have a bias. But I would also say if you do have a bias and it's toward workers, that's wonderful. No one has a bias towards workers. Usually it's the employers that come out smelling like a rose. And I just want to make a comment to my senator friend over here about you and Mr. Ross and your relationship in retaining him. I would just say that like-minded people stick together, that if I were going to work with someone or hire someone as a progressive Democrat, I probably wouldn't pick a conservative Republican to work with me. We might like each other, but probably our views are a little bit different. So I just wanted to make a couple comments before I ask you some questions. You've been on the board for 17 years. I know in my 20 years with the labor movement, some of the worst working conditions were for our farm workers up and down the state, the people who put food on our table. And I'm just wondering if conditions have gotten any better, if you've seen improvements in the 17 years that you've been on the board.
I think that the laws that have been adopted by the legislature provide a backdrop for conditions, whether it's heat or what have you. Overall, I would say this. The farm workers, and I know that there are farm workers here today, it is an amazing thing to see them at work. And I know all of us, no matter whether we're an employer, management, and I am in management. As a board member, I'm a manager. To see the farm workers out there, oftentimes with the farmers themselves, and what's also changed is some of the mechanization, which doesn't take the place of the farm worker, but provides for efficiencies, and I marvel. Because I go to the grocery store and I see the berries, the strawberries, the peaches, the broccoli, the cauliflower, and I've seen them harvested. And it is an amazing thing. I wish I could package up for my friends that when you go in the grocery store, all of that is handpicked, and the workforce is amazing. So I think, if anything, what I've seen over the years is frankly simply a greater efficiency, which is, I think, a good thing.
I would agree that efficiency is better, but my main concern is the workers. Do you think that the working conditions have gotten better for them?
I think the working conditions have gotten better. There are ancillary things such as housing, which is not in our purview, that needs some work. I think all would agree on that. But I think the conditions have gotten better.
Good. Well, that is a step in the right direction, and from my view, I do think, and it's not your job to do this, I think we have a long ways to go for our farmers. The board has been operating minus 2 positions. How has that hurt you trying to do your job and the caseload that you have to fill?
Honestly, I would have to say it has not hurt insofar as the board members that I serve with have all been very committed. One of the senators asked me what happens if somebody is sick or on vacation. That person comes off of vacation, gets on the phone with us. The person who is sick is on the phone with us to meet our deadlines. So we have been able to keep up with the workload and have been, and our published decisions are there as proof positive of getting the work done.
Very good, thank you. That's all I have for questions. I just make one more statement for the record, and that is in the case of Gerwin Industry, Mr. Gerwin, he is a billionaire, and I would wonder if he is supporting the farm worker overtime bill. I'm not asking you to answer that, but I would doubt that he is. So with that, Mr. Pro Tem, that's all I have.
That was a rhetorical question, or?
It was a rhetorical
an editorial
question.
right there. Okay.
More of an editorial, yes.
So we have it for the record. Why don't we go on to our vice chair, Mr. Canella,
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem.
one of the greatest farmers we have in Ceres,
I have
California.
a small garden in my backyard. I do not employ any farm workers, just myself, so it's not doing well. A lot of questions have been asked, and I've enjoyed our meeting today, or not today, but a couple of weeks ago, but just a few follow-ups. As I recall in that meeting that you had with Senator Berryhill and I, he asked that question about the numbers and if you could show the metrics on the cases for the industry and for the farm workers. And you, I thought, committed at that time that you would get that information. Is that information not available?
It is available.
Okay.
Yes, because it's all based on our published decisions and our published administrative orders. We can certainly provide that to
Well,
you.
I think we were hopeful you would provide it by the meeting, so.
And the reason why I was cautious is because I don't want any kind of a impression that that was some kind of a percentage, kind of a metric,
Yeah.
but rather that by the natural course of decisions coming before us, there are winners and losers, and in that array, there are times when the union loses, there's times when the employer loses, there are times when the individual farm workers lose as well. And on the reverse, there are times when each wins. And that is reflected in the array of decisions.
I understand that, but I hope you can understand from our perspective, if one side is always losing, then that would be a bias. And that's why we wanted to see what the metric was to show, because in our meeting, you assured us that you're fair and unbiased. And I don't think any of us really want any bias, right? Because if it's bias for one side, then the other commissioner could have bias for the other side. I want there to be no bias whatsoever. You judge every case on its merits and make a decision. So I think seeing how you've ruled over the past, I think would have been helpful. So it's unfortunate you don't have that, but it's fine, you don't have it. So on the conflict of interest, again, there's a legal conflict of interest, and then there's the kind of the appearance of a conflict of interest. And as I understand it, the complaint went to the board to say you had a conflict, and then you participated in just the vote to say whether you have a conflict. That seems unusual to me. I think I would have excused myself and say, look, here's what I think. I'm going to leave the room. You, rest of your board, you vote on it and make your decision, because it seems like you would have an influence on your fellow board members. So why wouldn't you? I understand why you ruled on the case, because the board said you don't have a conflict, but why wouldn't you just remove yourself from the vote on whether you had a conflict?
You know, based on past practice and how other boards have assessed that, other boards prior to my serving handle it in the same manner. And sitting judges themselves rule on petitions, what have you. So it is not unusual. And also, in terms of delving into the appearances and so forth, again, going by case law, longstanding standards and so forth, and I just wanted to say that, for example, in our board decision, we cite to the Morongo Band of Mission Indians, the Today's Fresh Start, and they stand for the proposition that under this legal standard, neither prior political affiliations, contributions, etc., nor speculation drawn from them establish evidence of actual bias. That you really need to look at those decisions and the rulings, and in looking at my rulings, they show that I have, and the board has relied on rule of law.
Yeah, but again, I'm not talking about you deciding on that actual case. I just think if I were in your place and someone came to me and said, look, we believe you have a conflict of interest, and I said, okay, let the rules body decide whether I have a conflict, I would not participate in that discussion, because I would think that it's like, look, I'm going to make my case and all of you make the decision. So I think the fact that you were involved in the decision on whether you had a conflict, I think that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I think in the future, if that came, I think it would be better for all concerned if you just left the room. Here's why I don't think I have a conflict. I'm going to be out there. You guys decide whether I have a conflict of interest or not. That's the only point. I think people were concerned for that. So whatever. I don't think you broke the law or anything like that. But again, it's the appearance of a conflict of interest. So the other thing is the board, you guys haven't had a meeting since January, and the last published minutes of the board are from April of 2015. And again, there's this concern that the board is, well, you're up here today, maybe it's the board, but we'll just talk about you, that you're biased. You say that you're not, and okay, but when you're not even publishing minutes for over a year, there's not transparency, and so that makes them more and more concerned about what the board's doing. why can't you just get the minutes out? Just, you have a meeting, you make a decision, and the minutes get out.
Senator, we are subject to Bagley-Keene, the Open Meetings Act. From time to time, the chair will call a public meeting. Our work on cases are done through closed session. That is the procedure both at the national board and the state board. A board meeting last December. Our next meeting is coming up on June 30. At the June 30, under Bagley-Keene, those minutes will be presented and we'll vote to approve them, and then they will be published.
Okay, so you had a public meeting in January
December.
of 2000, December of 2016.
2015, yeah.
I'm sorry, of course, it's not 2016 December yet. December 2015 was your last public meeting, yet your last minutes are reflected are April of 2015. So why couldn't you have caught up on your minutes at your December meeting?
April. All right, this is something I'm going to go back and check because it seems to me we had a public meeting prior to April of 2015. And those minutes should be there because in December of 2015, again, by my recollection, is we approved the minutes from the previous public meetings. So they should be posted on the website.
If they're not, can you just make an effort to get minutes out immediately, just so people, look, we don't want to give people more fuel to feel like they're being, not being heard, right? So if we can get those minutes out there, that would be great. On the, let's see, my next question here. So you went to you attended the 50th anniversary, and you mentioned this in your opening comments, 50th anniversary of the celebration of the UFW, and I think the 50th anniversary, that should be celebrated, but for a board member who is unbiased and looks at all cases the same, you want to be careful, and I know I've seen you at agricultural events as well. Now they've been smaller, they haven't been the 50th anniversary type things, it's just been a dinner, but do you feel like you go to all things equally? Do you go to UFW, do you go to the Farm Bureau, do you go to different industry events as well?
I do, Senator. And I really work to make myself accessible to all. There are more grower associations, so I end up going to more grower activities.
Okay. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you very much. This has been a fascinating discussion thus far, sir. If I could ask a question of the secretary of the committee or anyone who could tell me the date that I focus on her lovely first name so much.
Shiroma?
Ms. Shiroma, when it was public that today would be her confirmation hearing? Do we know the date that she was listed in the file, that she would be confirmed today? About 2 weeks, okay. I ask that because I don't find it helpful as a city member of the Rules Committee to walk in and receive an 8-page letter of opposition on the desk.
Which letter are you referring to?
The Raymundo and Associates Law Corporation, dated June 20th, date stamped June 20th, received by Senate Rules Committee.
And today's
It's an 8-page, it's, pretty dense. And as a city member of Rules Committee, it's our collective obligation to weigh all information. I heard my colleagues say that this was the one appointee with the most opposition he's seen in 9 years. It hasn't been mine even as a city member of Rules Committee. I had one letter that was received Friday at 2 p.m. prior to walking in today. So to receive the Raymundo letter today, 8-page long, I saw the individual, but in terms of written communication as a member, I got the letter from Western Growers. So I just wanted to be clear, it wasn't just me, that she was on file for a respectable amount of time for opposition to have communicated. With that, let me talk a little bit about, I appreciate having the conversation with you. I do want to ask you, having done my speed reading on the 8-page letter, the first page or two references the state's audit, the 2015 audit from the Department of Finance, and it identified significant weaknesses preventing the ALRB from producing reliable workload and financial data. some of which was attributed to the time during which you were chairperson. Could you just respond in general to the audit, your perception and plans for corrective action, just to educate us all?
Yes, Senator, and, I haven't seen that letter either, but that's okay. That's okay. Yes, the OSA audit pointed out a number of things that have been addressed in terms of the financial record retention, the filling of vacancies, the tracking of workload, and I would guesstimate that we are probably 80% complete in finishing up all of these different things, so we're in good shape on that.
And I know the board isn't at its capacity. It's 5 members. You've been operating with 3 for how long?
I'm probably since the Governor Schwarzenegger administration. Yeah.
So do you attribute any of the shortcomings identified in the audit to operating without a full board?
I would not, but rather that we did have some transition with some seasoned staff retiring. We have worked to make sure that we've got those work manuals at everyone's desks, and they know all the requirements, DGS and so forth.
Thank you. Another question referencing what I read in the Raimundo letter. Since you didn't see it, I will just reference the actual language in the letter. Colleagues, it's the bottom of page 5. And it goes back to the issue already raised with regard to your relationship with a local consultant. It says that you have political ties to the union. Richie Ross has acted directly as advisor, consultant, lobbyist, and paid representative to the United Farm Workers for many years. His experience with the UFW includes advising the organization in matters directly involving ALRB. Mr. Ross has also had an ongoing close business relationship with the chairwoman for a period of more than a decade, a relationship that Shiroma has curiously failed to disclose throughout her term of office while she quietly set the stage to protect the UFW. I'm clear that your direct business relationship with him was as your consultant when you ran for another board.
For the SMUD board, which I still serve on, yes.
And and that was as a part of your candidacy for the board?
Yes, that's right, as part of my
And so
candidacy.
do you have the same reporting requirements as we do for financial contributions received or payments made
I do
to
indeed.
consultants?
I do indeed.
And so did you
yes.
report at that point in
Yes.
those campaign documents your payment to Mr. Ross?
Yes, ma'am.
So this has curiously failed to disclose?
All
That's not
disclosed.
true.
All disclosed, met all deadlines, all FPPC, Secretary of State, and I'm not sure if Mr. Raimundo has divulged that he represents the DCERT petitioner in the Growan case.
Yes, he acknowledges that in the opening
Right,
sentence.
yes.
that
And
he
brought up,
represents.
and filed on her behalf, the petition that was dealt with in our published decision, which is on our website, and goes through each of these, all the various allegations, what have you.
Okay, but you did file
Yeah, I
your
did file.
campaign reports, payments
Absolutely.
made to Mr. Ross?
Absolutely, all
Okay,
filed.
another quick question. Again, referencing the letter, the final page, Shiroma's one-sided political support indicates a blatant predisposition favoring her political allies in any matter where the UFW is before the ALRB and a disregard for the ethical rules that bind her. Could you talk to me about the ethical standards and expectations of an ALRB member?
Yes.
And I don't know if this is ethical rules in the generic terms, like we should treat others as we want to be treated, or if these are ethical rules that are documented in a governed document that govern you.
There are laws that apply to me, and laws that require ethics training every 2 years, that conflict occurs when there is an economic conflict. If I benefit financially on something, here I have had no financial benefit. There is no financial interest. All paperwork filed. And, in some of these materials, talking about my political donations, those are allowed by law. And it is part of my belief in public service that when there is someone who is running for office that I think is going to do a good job, I have donated. I have donated to things like Planned Parenthood. In my resume, you see.
Which is your fundamental right. I would say as we continue to talk about the correlation and relationships, it's, the kind of conversation as a sitting member of the legislature that I personally take offense to. In the Western Growers letter, the notion that Mr. Ross's connections with the UFW are longstanding and well-known, as is his influence in the legislature. As we all are well aware, any number of special interests have a role to play to represent their special interests before the legislature. And I find it very ironic that a letter written on the Western Growers letterhead suggests that while we certainly know that the Western Growers have played a very strong, active role in supporting candidates, city members opposing candidates, contributed dollars to independent expenditure committees. So it feels a little like throwing rocks at glass houses to suggest that one consultant outweighs the amazing power that the Western Growers have over the political process in this legislature. I think finally I would just say this whole notion of an expectation of a balance in your rulings is curious to me, because as I read the role and responsibility of the ALRB, it's adjudicating according to the law.
Yes, ma'am.
And while we can certainly track what those rulings are, do you feel as a sitting member of the board that we should have an expectation of equality in terms of your rulings?
And that, thank you, Senator. That was the point that I was perhaps inartfully making earlier, is that the expectation is that each case, whatever that case involves, will be judged by the evidence, the law, what past case law has said in terms of how to rule under such findings of fact and scenarios, and that the board shall be that neutral arbitrator in taking all of that based on an administrative law judge's decision based on case law, and then issue a decision. So that's the caution that I was making about statistics, although in respect to the vice chair, we'll follow up on that. And in the end, it's the published decision that for each case must be rule of law.
And so the laws that you adjudicate in accordance to are laws based on case law, laws
Yes,
passed by this
that's right.
legislature.
Yes, that's right. It starts with the statute itself, which is patterned after the National Act. And then with that, the case law, we are now 41 years old in terms of case law for the State Act, 80 years plus for the National Labor Relations Act, and the unique facts of each case, sometimes not so unique. We see similar cases sometimes, and with all of that, then to rule. Did the administrative law judge get it right or not? Did we get it right? And the appeals court will tell us. And again, the appeals court, that higher authority, has ruled that during my tenure, 90% of those cases appealed have been affirmed that the board got it right. Those couple cases where we didn't get it right, we learn, we go on. I'll stop there.
Thank you. And I would just say, finally, Mr. Pro Tem, on our desk also today were 2 additional documents. Only one of the 2, a reference is actually included. I know I think it's am I the only one that was lucky enough to get these? They delivered these. Oh, they delivered them to the offices.
Oh, they
Okay, they were
delivered-
delivered to
okay.
the
I didn't see
offices
the
today.
green one.
Only one, much like the law currently requires for our campaign and political documentation, you have to say who paid for it and the source of. So only one, the green one, actually has a source. This one, unless I'm missing it, does not tell us who compiled the information and who paid for it. And I just raised that as we talk about influence over the legislature, but I have to say, this whole diagram that shows, attempts to show a connection to the legislature and the union and referencing contributions made to individual city members paints a very dangerous picture that as a city member of the legislature, I find troubling. Not only in a confirmation hearing, but this constant reference to a member introducing a bill to support one group, and then the correlations to a contribution received from a third party is troubling to me, sir. Thank you. And thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Shiroma, let me ask you, I'm going to take a little, I'm going to deviate a little bit from the questions and commentaries from the members here today. And let me talk about, let me broach a subject with you with regards to the farm workers today, not the United Farm Workers, but the farm workers in general. Many of them are non-English, and a good percentage that's growing, non-Spanish speakers, some who speak dialects or indigenous language, Mixteco, Triqui, Zapoteco, whether they're from Oaxaca or other parts of the Republic or Mexico or elsewhere in the Americas. Given the vulnerability of many farm workers, whether it's harassment, sexual discrimination of some sort, any other type of intimidation, just in general, not anything in specific, nothing in specific to, I think the grower that was mentioned quite frequently today. What are you guys at LRB doing with regard to your outreach to many of the workers so they understand what their rights are in California with respects to the ALRB?
So first of all, that language barrier is a big one. And we recognize that in hearings that involve farm workers who don't speak Spanish, maybe, as you say, Mixteco, Zapotec, Triqui, and so forth, that it's important for us to have translators, and we do. And what happens in those hearings is that English to Spanish to the indigenous language to Spanish to English. Much patience is taken in connecting those hearings. In terms of education and outreach, we did hear last fall through a series of public hearings that this is a serious need in terms of workers knowing their rights, and this is a challenge. So the board continues to support the General Counsel's efforts. The General Counsel staff is in the field and out in the regions as far as providing information, whether it's at housing, health fairs, what have you, but then also to look at providing, it's harder to translate materials because there's not necessarily a written language or a written language that is understood by some of the indigenous farm worker groups. We do have a staff proposed regulation to increase the opportunity for workers to ask for education, and that is at least a first step.
Well, let me ask you a question so I can understand, or maybe you can clarify better. So you obviously identified the problem. What are you doing at LARB to provide a solution? Because obviously, if the workers don't know their rights, and if staff members, which I'm going to make the assumption at LRB, a lot of folks speak mostly, they're monolingual speakers, English, and not bilingual. And then in this case, it's trilingual, or more than 3 languages, perhaps. Well, I understand the challenge. What are you doing to change staff culture so staff either, I don't know if you're going to have staff members who are going to go learn a different language. I just don't know if that's in the cards. But if you hire folks, perhaps, to work with you in terms of the outreach, that understand the various languages.
Yes. So first of all is, in fact, to garner, it's almost a word of mouth, to look at filling vacancies in the region where we can garner employees who speak some of the languages. Some years ago, we were successful in having one. It's only one person, and we do have a much greater need. Also, I do want to give credit to our chair, who is working to put together a
task
team,
force, a work group across
that
unit
that is
team, yeah.
focused entirely and 100% on education, so that their sole focus is on education. And
Has that team been put together?
it has not yet been put together.
Okay.
I would say it's in the formulation stage. I'm hoping, I know he hopes, that we
Okay.
will have that done fairly quickly.
I would probably expedite that as quickly as possible, because this is a large, growing constituency that you handle. This is your universe with regards to,
Yes,
your constituents. And if you don't have a way to communicate with them, I'm not quite sure how you're going to be able to, for those who are able to move forward or come forward, I'm not quite sure how you're going to be able to deal with the most basic fundamentals of communication and extraction, if you will, of information or data necessary to adjudicate any other type of case that are before you and the other commissioners, and Mr. Gould and others, and your general counsel, and so forth. So it's not specific to LARB. I know that's sort of pervasive among many agencies right now, especially with the changing demographics, that they're behind the curve. They're actually very, very slow. And doing the first and foremost, most important thing is usually left, to the very end, which is sort of kind of, I never kind of understood that. It's kind of approaches upside down. And it's not just specifically you, but just sort of pervasive across the board in many agencies, especially dealing with constituencies that are not as easily accessible because of the language barrier that exists. And obviously, those at the lowest economic strata, which are obviously the farm workers, it is much more challenging. But that means I think LRB has to be much more proactive and take the initiative, because it's surely not going to come to you on the natural. So that means unless you move with initiative, you move with a sense of proactiveness and action, it's not going to come to you. It's just not. And you guys are smart folks, lawyers, Stanford lawyers, professors, yada, yada, yada. I mean, this is not rocket scientists. This is pretty simple stuff.
Agree. And I did put in my letter to the Senate that I would like to put more focus on this. This was back on May 12th. And we saw the need. And layered on that as well are the undocumented status of workers, which makes them even more afraid to come forward. But our key thing is that we do educate farm workers, supervisors, employers on the act, because the more that we can prevent violations of workers' rights, the better. The violation that is prevented, we'll never know. It makes it equally important that I have a commitment there in my letter. I commit to you, Chairman, of those efforts on my part.
Now, Ms. Shiroma, I'm looking at, your father was a farm worker.
Yes, and he is here today.
Near Lodi, right? Oh, that's right.
Lodi,
You
a
introduced your
Campo
father.
area, yes.
Okay, that's, Anthony, it's near you, right? Are you sure it's that? Or is it- But in the central valley. Yeah. In the central valley, okay. Got it, okay.
In fact, my dad was still pruning a grape vineyard in a Campo Lodi at age 70. Now, he's 90 now. But
He's still out there pruning, or?
he prunes my peach tree.
Your peach tree, gotcha. Oh, A Campo. Lodi.
A Campo,
Gotcha.
3 miles north of Lodi.
Okay,
Yes.
fantastic. So why don't we do this? Let's go to those who are going to testify in support of Ms. Shiroma. I'm going to say those who are going to testify in support. We'll get those who are in opposition, and we'll get those who may be agnostic across the board. But I'm just going to say those who are in support of Ms. Shiroma, I'm going to ask for brevity from all individuals, whether you're supportive or you're in opposition. I'm going to ask for brevity para aquellas personas que quieren testificar al respecto de la nominación de Genevieve Shiroma, al respecto de la Junta o la Mesa de Trabajo Agrícola. Les voy a pedir, por favor, que sean breves, por favor. Aquellos que van a apoyar la candidatura de la señora Genevieve Shiroma, aquellos que se oponen a la candidatura, les voy a pedir, por favor, que sean breves. Vamos a comenzar para aquellas personas que son apoyantes, aquellos que apoyan la señora Genevieve Shiroma. Those who are in support of Ms. Shiroma, come on up. Okay? Those who are in opposition, aquellos que se oponen. Those who are in opposition. And I'm gonna say, let me underscore again. I'm gonna ask for. I want to make sure you're heard, but I want to make sure it is brief also too. Por favor, voy a enfatizar y subrayar, ¿no? Por favor, que no sean largos, hay que ser muy breves, por favor. Adelante.
Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Soul. I'm a state worker for the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, and I have been out on stress leave from the agency since mid-February. I have faced an unprecedented level of harassment from the board members of this agency ever since I blew the whistle on the collusion that exists between the ALRB and the UFW union. This is an article I discovered listing an ALRB employee. Thank you. It's an article I discovered listing an ALRB employee, Jessica Arciniega, as a UFW organizer. Arciniega is still employed by the ALRB. Now, as many of you know, Genevieve Shiroma has worked tirelessly to try and subvert the democratic process in order to force farm workers into the UFW. The website Pick Justice has an extensive amount of information on this subject. Genevieve has also thrown her unwavering support behind Catherine Rivera Hernandez, the board member who is trying to fire me for what I know. Together, Genevieve and Catherine hold the majority vote in regards to the three-member board, giving them an unchecked power over any case that comes before the board itself. The two have been in cahoots for nearly a decade. By challenging Genevieve Shiroma's board confirmation, you will be making a powerful step in the direction of ending the corruption that stifles our democratic processes here in Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness in opposition. In opposition. Next witness in opposition. Come on up.
Thank you for allowing me to speak here today. My name is Jesse Rojas. I'm a farm worker rights activist from the Central Valley. I will be very short, respectful to the time. I just have a few points to mention. I would like to ask, I hear a lot about unions, growers, employers, but I'd like to talk to you from a different side. I think the most important side, which is the reason why the Agricultural Labor Relations Board was originally established, and I believe those are the workers, the people out there that are picking the fruit and the vegetables that we all eat. I believe those are the most important ones. And, some of them are here. I'm sure there's a lot of others that would have loved to attend this type of events, and they're unable to. My question to you, committee members, is how would you feel if in your election every 2 or 4 years, however that is, all the votes were thrown away instead of counted? That's what's happening to these thousands of workers in the Central Valley. Votes equaling all the votes in, for example, Montclair or Bloomington in Senator Leiva's district, or Westmont in Senator Mitchell's district. Genevieve Shiroma wants those votes to be destroyed. Let me talk to you about thousands. I want to focus on the word thousands of workers. These thousands of workers in the Central Valley, particularly Garawan farming, they employ over 3,000 workers, and I think we mentioned this company, this workers, a lot during this meeting. They've had the largest protests in California agricultural labor history, the largest ones by far. You cannot deny that. You simply go to our website, pickjustice.com, you go to YouTube, you put Garawan, you put UFW, you'll find hundreds of videos that show that. They've taken them themselves, the media has shown it over and over again. They've protested multiple times outside of the Visalia ALRB office, multiple times at the courthouse while the ALRB was inside trying to force a fake contract on the workers without letting them choose.
Okay, Mr. Rojas, I wanna make sure you get your perspective across, but I need you to sort of condense and synthesize. It's clear that you're in opposition to Ms. Shiroma. I don't want you to give us a full narrative. I think we understand the dynamic with regards to the controversy, if you will, of the election, whether one's for it or against it. Just get down to your basic
Okay,
points
I'll
right
cut
now.
down some of my points that I think are important to mention. I know a lot of these you probably know it, but I think it's important from them. As you know, the language barrier, right? I'd like to get it across in English. So these aren't fake employees like when you see from the UFW. The majority petition for this decertification. The ALRB ran the election, approved the election, but they refused to count the ballots, which is their fundamental right, like Senator Mitchell mentioned earlier about something else. Now we know why Genevieve Shiroma does not want the employees the right to have a choice. How can someone who has such a close relationship with the key representative of the UFW be allowed to decide on UFW issues? I cannot comprehend that. And it amazes me. I come from Mexico myself. I came here when I was 11 years old. I was born in Colima, Mexico, and I see a lot of those issues that my family ran away from. And it's sad for me to see that here in the state in America, the country of opportunity and freedom. Everyone knows why the ALRB doesn't want to count the votes. They know they lost. They know the employees do not want the UFW. And I'm not talking about a small minority of employees. I'm saying probably about 90% of the employees do not want the UFW. ALRB knows it, the UFW knows it, Richie Ross knows it, and Genevieve Shiroma knows it. So these employees want you, committee members, to protect them against the ALRB.
Right.
The point of the ALRB is for them to be protected.
Okay.
They don't feel like that.
All right, I'm gonna ask you where you have to wind down because we had a lot of folks right here behind you. Okay, Mr. Rojas.
And
So
the
you
last
have a
thing I
few
want to say,
seconds.
the last thing I would like to say is, please replace Genevieve Shiroma with someone who will actually protect them. And lastly, it takes a lot of courage for them to be here. Since the last time they came to Sacramento, the ALRB retaliated against them. So I just want to applaud them for taking the courage to actually come here. It's not easy to go unpaid, find a babysitter like Mrs. Hernandez back there, take care of her daughter. They're not paid to come up here. I think it's good to applaud them to be involved in the political process and in the process that affects them.
Absolutely.
So I urge you to replace her.
Thank you, Mr. Rojas. Next witness in opposition. Next witness in opposition.
I'm going to defer to the workers in case we run out of time.
Okay, fantastic.
I'd rather have them be heard than I.
All right, then let's have the workers. Thank you very much.
If you don't mind, Senator De Leon, I'll do 30 seconds each and I'll translate, or you wanted them to just say it in Spanish? It's up to you.
Let me ask
I'll limit
for
them
the
30
members,
seconds.
what's the members' pleasure? Translation, okay. Well, you can't, yeah, she won't be able to take it down. They can say, but if the members do want to hear the translation, but be mindful, do not add, anything else because I
Spanish,
know.
you'll be able to know, right?
I know, yeah.
Mi nombre es José García y yo estoy en contra de Shiroma porque todo este tiempo que hemos estado haciendo protestas en grande, siempre se nos ha negado la ayuda de ellos. Se ha mirado mucha corrupción de parte de labores agrícolas y siempre nos sentimos intimidados porque siempre cuando comenzamos las protestas no nos atendían. Nos sentimos humillados y discriminados porque de primero cuando comenzamos no nos hacían caso. Y ahora que todo el tiempo dicen ellos que somos unos ignorantes por pelear nuestros derechos.
Muchas gracias. Ahí está, gracias.
You don't need me to translate, right?
Yeah, colleagues,
You understand,
this right now. The essence is because if we make sure everyone's heard, it's going to be double translation, and it's just double the time.
Okay.
So I'll let you guys know.
I'm telling them to do it fast.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Rolando
Buenas tardes.
Padilla. Yo estoy aquí porque estoy en contra de la señora Shiroma, porque en primer lugar no quiere contar nuestros votos. Sentimos que está a favor más de la UFW que de nosotros. Y nosotros somos los trabajadores del campo, que le echamos ganas, no queremos que se nos quiten el 3% para nada. Entonces ella no nos ha hecho nada de apoyo, nada. Queremos que la cambien o no la queremos que esté enfrente de la voz. Ok, gracias.
Muchas gracias. Next witness in support.
I'd kind of like to know what they're saying.
Okay, well, we'll get a summary. I'll give you that summary.
Sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Virginia Chaires. Aquí vengo delante de la señora Shiroma. Una vez yo tuve una plática con ella, donde ella me dijo que yo tenía mis derechos para defenderlos. Si yo quería unión, iba a entrar a la unión, nos iban a dar votación. hicimos las votaciones, ellos no han hecho nada. Ahora yo le traigo este contrato. Este es un contrato que ellos nos querían imponer. Nos quiere imponer la unión. Aquí hay discriminación. Quiero que me diga ella, ¿por qué vamos a discriminar? Estamos en un país que no es discriminación. Nosotros somos trabajadores realmente legales. Yo tengo 7 años trabajando en esa compañía y no he visto ahí ninguna mal en mi contra. Hemos peleado mucho con la ley laboral, con la unión, no nos han hecho caso. Yo creo que la señora Shiroma es incompetente y ha sido incapaz de resolver nuestro problema porque ya van como más de 3 años que hemos estado peleando y luchas y luchas y luchas y no ha hecho nada por nosotros.
Gracias, gracias señora. Adelante, por favor, gracias.
Yo me llamo Ana. Yo lo que quiero es que cuenten los votos de los trabajadores que trabajamos ahí en Gueragua, porque creo que a nadie se nos ha obligado a trabajar ahí. Todos trabajamos ahí porque nos gusta trabajar ahí. Y pues hubo una votación que hasta ahorita, bueno, desde el día de la votación, un miembro de ahí de la ley laboral, cuando votamos, dijo, van a votar, pero sus votos no van a ser contados. Nos los dijo, lo dijo desde ese momento. Entonces digo, que se supone que ellos están la ley laboral está para apoyarnos. Entonces, ¿por qué no lo han hecho? Yo lo que quiero es que los votos se cuenten y que nos den el derecho a elegir lo que queremos.
Muchas gracias, señora. Gracias. Adelante.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Miguel Sánchez. Vengo acá a ver en contra de la señora Shiroma. Lo mismo de mis compañeros. Estoy trabajando en la compañía desde el 2002. Siempre hemos querido apoyo. Nos sentimos defraudados en parte del Consejo Laboral. En el 2015, septiembre 9, fuimos a una sesión en un hotel que estaba la Unión de Campesinos, la ley laboral, y le dijeron al de seguridad que los de camisetas azules no los dejaran entrar nada más los de camisetas rojas. Entonces ahí que nos da a pensar que no tenemos el apoyo necesario. Esa es una. Otra de las cosas, no sé por qué no quieren abrir los votos. Pienso que nosotros somos libres de elegir si queremos una unión o no que nos represente. Que no sé qué es el temor o por qué no quieren. Dijeron que iba a haber votación, se hizo la votación, los votos no se han contado. Entonces, estamos en contra de ella por muchas cosas que nos sentimos defraudados.
Bueno, gracias. Muchas gracias.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Santos Quesada. Yo vengo a oponerme de la señora Shiroma, que hagan un cambio por ella, por favor, porque no nos está ayudando para nada.
Gracias. Muchas gracias.
If I may add something real quick on the record.
What I'll do is I'll give you 30 seconds to, there's a lot of adjectives there, obviously, so I'll give you 30 seconds to surmise.
Okay. I just want to add on the record, yes. Senator Leyva mentioned earlier working men and women. These are working men and women. I invite and urge all of you committee members, all you senators, to come down to the fields and visit the thousands of workers. I know one of you mentioned that, but please come and visit them. That's the only way to truly find out. You have? In my district. Oh, no, but I invite you to visit these workers, the 3,000 plus workers in the Central Valley. Well, they have their own issue. Their votes haven't been counted.
Okay, hold on, stop. I don't want a colloquy happening right here, number one. I need you to pass the microphone now, right now. Let's go.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rojas.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, wait a second. You said you were going to give up your time.
I was going to defer because we had time, but I wanted to speak.
Well, why don't we go through the, okay, let's do the jump very quickly.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Matthew Allen with Western Growers Association. We're respectfully opposed to the confirmation.
Is the mic on or off? Yeah. Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Matthew Allen, Western Growers Association. We're respectfully opposed to the confirmation.
Okay. Next witness.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Louis Brown, on behalf of California Fresh Fruit Association, Nisei Farmers League, and California Citrus Mutual, in opposition to the confirmation today. Thank you.
Okay, last witness in opposition.
I will be brief, sir. I apologize. My name is Anthony Raimondo. I'm the attorney for the decertification petitioner, Sylvia Lopez. I apologize for the late submission of my letter. Ms. Lopez contacted me late last week. She's actually in the hospital today. She didn't realize that a surgery conflicted with this date, so she asked me to make a submission on her behalf, which I received that on Friday. So I apologize at the lateness of the submission. I simply was hoping to be heard, and I'm ordinarily an advocate. I'm a little more comfortable in a courtroom than I am in this setting, so I apologize if I'm a little bit clumsy at this. The only points that I would like to make are with reference to the Department of Finance audit. These were very serious structural and record-keeping problems going on internally within the board. During a time when Ms. Shiroma, as she acknowledges, was in a management position, she has responsibility for these failures of record-keeping. In any organization, private or public, financial and resource utilization data is essential to the evaluation of the success of the mission and the utilization of resources that belong to the public in this case. What the Department of Finance found in that audit was that 28 of 53 ALRB employees were not recording their time and their activities within an internal tracking system. That failure included Ms. Shiroma. It included the chairperson and the members of the board in failing to track their own activities that makes them accountable to the taxpayers that they serve, and I assert to you, the farm workers that they serve. So there's a job performance issue here that internally this agency has administratively failed to maintain basic record-keeping processes that are essential for them to be able to be evaluated, whether it's by the finance department or by this committee. Data was missing today. Lastly, with respect,
wrap it up, okay?
I'm wrapping up right now.
Right.
Lastly, with respect to the issue of Ms. Shiroma's entanglements with Mr. Ross, I do tend to agree with you that like-minded people find each other. You may have seen the article that focused on Mr. Ross's teaching at Sacramento State. It was about a month and a half ago. He bragged about how he teaches his students that in his class, cheating is okay because he's teaching about lobbying. Like-minded people do find each other. There is a problem in this agency. It is an agency that is in turmoil. It can't account for its activities. It can't account for how it spends money. It spends $200,000 or more a year on temporary positions that are allotted a $10,000 budget. This is a management failure that beyond all of the turmoil that surrounds this Garawan case and my involvement in it, I don't want to waste your time advocating for my client's position. What I ask you to do is look at the administrative functions of this agency and read that audit and ask yourself, is this the type of leadership that should continue with this type of fiscal mismanagement and internal unaccountability and failure of record keeping? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Armando. Any other folks in opposition? I want to make sure that any other folks in opposition? I'm seeing none. Okay. No other folks in opposition. I think we've had a pretty thorough, pretty comprehensive hearing with regards to the nomination of Ms. Shiroma. Colleagues, any other last questions? I want to make sure it's out of your system.
What was the gist of the workers? What were they saying?
The gist of the workers is they felt there was discrimination. There was the issue of the last election, and they didn't feel that the votes were counted, and they want the votes to be counted. That's pretty much a synopsis. They want the votes to be counted. I can't tell you I have the expertise with regards to this specific case, so I just going to give you the literal translation is they want the votes counted without any value judgment to the outcome of this specific election, whether one's for it or against it, they're for the outcome or against the outcome, whether they want to rectify it or not, but they felt that's what they felt, by far and large, okay? So with that, can I get a motion for the motion for Ms. Shiroma? We have a motion. We have a motion made by Ms. Leyva. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senators Berryhill? No. Berryhill, no. Leyva? Aye. Leyva, aye. Mitchell? Aye. Mitchell, aye. Canella? No. Canella, no. De Leon?
Aye.
De Leon, aye.
By a razor-thin margin, hanging off that cliff with your fingernails, you pass on a 3-2 vote. You will go to the Senate floor. I'm sure that, hearing the voices in opposition, that there'll be a lot of engagement from this point forward, obviously, with members of the Senate on both sides of that aisle. I would highly recommend that you engage with all senators, both Republicans as well as Democrats, as your motion moves forward for a full vote before the Senate. With that, congratulations, Ms. Shiroma.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
Members.
Okay, colleagues, we're going to move still, because we're on file item number 2. We're going to go with Mr. Kevin Chappelle, Commissioner Board of Parole Hearings. That is Mr. Chappelle. Where's Mr. Chappelle? Are you Mr. Chappelle? Mr. Chappelle, welcome. Mr. Chappelle, welcome. If there's any loved ones, any family members you'd like to introduce, please do so. We'll hear your statement, and then from there we'll go to questions, answers, and commentaries from the members themselves.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to introduce my 18-year-old son, Ryan, who's here in the audience.
Welcome, young man. Welcome. Fantastic.
So, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Senators. I'd like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude for allowing me to sit before you as part of this confirmation process for Commissioner for the Parole Committee. It's truly an honor to have been considered for this position. I would also like to take this time to publicly thank Governor Brown for this appointment. As you may know, I served the state of California for 27 years. I began my career as a correctional officer at Folsom State Prison, and I am proud to say that I ended my career as the warden at San Quentin State Prison. I believe that my experience and background with the department have provided me the requisite qualities for being successful as a Board of Parole Hearings Commissioner. One of my greatest achievements was my career with the state of California and the work I did to promote the safety of the citizens of the state. I was proud to serve the state of California with humility and respect. It is truly an honor to have this opportunity to continue serving the people of the state of California. As a commissioner, I believe I have a clear understanding of the parole suitability process, and I have been trained to follow the law in reaching a fair and impartial decision. During my career with the department, and especially when I served as a warden, I had firsthand exposure to how instrumental rehabilitative programs were in effectuating positive change in offenders. The eventual goal of incarceration is rehabilitation. Oftentimes, there may have been one or more extenuating circumstances or factors in the form of substance abuse and or lack of education, which contributed to a criminal offense. It is critical that we avail offenders to programs that provide them the skills and resources necessary to assist them in reintegrating and becoming productive and law-abiding citizens of their communities. Additionally, programs that assist parolees with continued self-help and programs that provide training on how to search for employment, prepare resumes, complete job applications, and interview skills, to name a few, are critical to an offender's continued success. I believe rehabilitative opportunities reduce the risk that offenders will commit new offenses post-release, which in turn keeps the public safe. So I hope to continue to serve the state of California in a fair, thorough, and objective manner in the parole suitability determination of offenders. I will be diligent and adhere to the laws and rules which oversee what I consider to be this very crucial process of the criminal justice system. In closing, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chair and Senators, for your time and permitting me this opportunity to share my background, experience, and qualifications. It is truly an honor to sit in front of you, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chappelle. Thank you for your statement. We'll start with Senator Leiva.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Good afternoon, Mr. Chappelle. First, let me say thank you very much for being willing to take on this position. I think it's a very hard job. Just two questions. You mentioned being a warden. How do you think that shapes your view of inmates when they come up for parole? How do you think maybe you have a different perspective than someone on the board who has not been a warden?
I see. I'd say my total experience, yes, being a warden was very important, but I think it's my total experience with the department, from being a correctional officer all the way up. I have had the opportunity to, I'd say, evaluate inmate behavior, inmate attitudes, different characteristics, and all the different classifications that I was in. I think it would serve me well with all the training that I've developed in all my positions.
I would agree with you. I think you have great experience. When considering parole, how much weight do you put on an inmate's participation in rehabilitation programs, or specifically a specific rehabilitation program. Is that important to you?
It's very important. I put a considerable weight to that. Of course, there was a antisocial, if you will, type of behavior that brought the inmate into incarceration. So when I look at the rehabilitative programs, I look to make sure that the programs actually match the behavior. And when I'm looking at an individual in front of me, I'm looking for current dangerousness, and by evaluating that, I'm looking at the behavior that got him to prison, and is he that same, he or she that same person that's sitting in front of me today? And I look at the rehabilitative programs to see if the programs matched up with the type of behavior.
Very good. Thank you very much. No more questions, Mr. Pro Tem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leyva. Mr. Berryhill.
Again, I want to thank you for coming up to the office. We had a great conversation. I think you're a great pick for this spot, and I'd like to move his confirmation at the proper time.
Thank you, Mr. Berryhill. Mr. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chabelle, I enjoyed our meeting earlier, and I appreciated your answers. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pro Tem. Good afternoon again.
Good afternoon.
As the parent of an 18-year-old young man, I'm sure you can fully appreciate the research that informed SB 260 and 261 that acknowledges the fact the diminished culpability of juveniles as compared to adults.
Correct.
As parents of teenagers, we know that there are not many adults. They're kids on their own developmental kind of spectrum. Given that, how do you approach youthful offender cases, and do you approach them any differently from those of adult offenders?
Yes, I do. I look at their social history, their background. And I look at the circumstances of their criminal history, including the life crime. And I look at those factors. I look at the factors of, was it an impulsive act? Was it an act committed under peer pressure? I look at it as an act of, was it an act of immaturity? And then I match it up with their institutional adjustment. And were those factors still present during their incarceration, or did they evolve and stop committing acts of impulsivity, or they were not being led by peer pressure? So yes, I do take those factors into strong consideration when reviewing those cases.
And I appreciate that 260, the Hancock bill, was just passed in 2013. So this really is the whole great weight process by which these characteristics of youthful offenders are being counted. I appreciate it's new, and I appreciate the fact that you've had very specific training with regard to how to deal with the adolescent brain in these cases. Is it your sense that the entire parole board has had that same training, that everybody is kind of approaching the youthful offender circumstance with the same level of training and perspective?
Yes, I say it is my view. Quite often, we are trained whenever there is a change in law, change in policy. We're thoroughly trained, and so I'd say yes, it is my view that all of the commissioners
Have that training,
yes.
because it does really reflect a culture shift in terms of our broader attitude around youthful offender. My second and last question, Mr. Pro Tem, will really kind of go to the other end of this spectrum with regard to medical and elderly parole. We've heard a number of bills since I've been in the legislature, particularly around medical parole. Some have been successful, most have not. So what factors do you consider unique specifically with regard to the medically incapacitated inmate populations? And how do you take these factors into account when determining suitability for parole?
I see. Well, we look at, when we're reviewing cases of expanded medical parole, we take into account medical status, and we match it up to the inmate's risk of offending in a violent manner. a very, very hard decision, very challenging, because sometimes you may have inmates that haven't received or haven't embraced that rehabilitative process. However, their medical status is such where they are in need of a higher level of medical treatment. So it's like I said, it's a really difficult decision to make. But I have to take into their medical status and match it up with their ability to reoffend if they were out in a community facility.
Is it your sense that the directive from the legislature has been clear enough? I completely appreciate, given all of the variables that you must take into consideration, and I'm not second guessing that at all. But do you think the legislature has been clear enough in our direction, or the court for that matter, to create fewer variables in deciding which medically terminal patient is released and those that are not?
I think the legislature has been clear, and the training has been excellent that I've received. But I just go back to those are just very, very difficult cases, just based on the circumstances.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. Pro Tem.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Chappelle, let me ask you, I'm looking over your qualifications, and I'm going to throw you perhaps a softball question.
Okay.
That's an open-ended question. Because I see your qualifications, and I could see it as a double-edged sword. A double-edged sword because you're the embodiment of the institution itself. Okay? You come from the culture of the corrections. You're an annuitant, or you were an annuitant, or you are currently an annuitant right now as a retired person. Your recent stint full-time was obviously warden of the famous San Quentin prison, you know, something that lives beyond, it's larger than life, if you will, in the psyche of America, you know, in terms of the history of San Quentin. So you were the former warden there, and obviously deputy warden at Folsom, and you've been there since either 1995, if I'm correct, in various positions within the correctional facilities.
Actually, it's 1987.
1987, okay, a little further, even further. Okay, okay, gotcha. 1987. So, that being said, you know more about this, or you have forgotten more about this than probably all of us combined know. So that you know you have an extra insight, a better insight through experience, through many years. Who's there, who games the system, who doesn't game the system, who's highly sociopathic in terms of manipulative individuals, those who with intention say, I want to improve my life, I don't want to be part of the gang lifestyle, I want to go into these programs to show, improve, and quantify, if you will, when the opportunity is before me to be before a parole board, that I can actually prove that I'm trying and I'm struggling, but I'm trying to get on that pathway for a better life. Because what you said is the antisocial behavior in some form, way, or shape got you into this situation. And a lot of tough breaks, if you will, too, with laws that this legislative body have passed, have taken a lot of discretion away from the judiciary, you know, branch of government, where whatever the judge wants to give, because we have added penalty among penalty and enhancement upon enhancement that whether you like it or not, they're with you for 20, 25 years. For perhaps a decade or generation ago, there was a 7-year, you know, prison term, but now it's become a 21, 25-year prison term. Because, and I think Ms. Mitchell made reference to the issue of poverty and race, and you're a person of color, obviously, and the issue of who gets access to justice and who doesn't, what the racial makeup is of our correctional facility today. So, and you made reference to rehab programs, and I don't know the rehabilitation programs, if there are enough programs from within the system itself for folks who want to make that proactive move and say, I want to be on this pathway right here. because I don't want to be here. I want to get out, you know, and I don't want to be a victim of recidivism. Once I get out, I don't ever want to come back in, you know, and even though we know that a lot of resources need to be invested to make sure that individual does not come back, you know, and hopefully, knock on wood, with the non-nons and with the realignment, as bumpy as it is in some ways, but this learning process, how we look, we assess, we figure this out, and we make the course corrections that are necessary, because obviously this costs way too much money. This is a waste of money for us as a legislature, pouring so much money into the prison system when we can do so, you know, and get these kids to UCLA or Cal State LA or elsewhere. Now, that being said, is it a double-edged sword? Because you're the former warden of San Quentin, you are the embodiment of the institution itself. You come across as a very nice fellow, by the way. You're very nice.
Thank you, appreciate
You're
that.
very nice, you know? You're very nice. So this is a softball question. This is an open-ended question for you to answer.
Okay.
Is it good that you be on this parole board? Or
Is it good for me to be on the
No, well,
parole
not for
board?
you.
Okay.
I'm talking about for California. Is it good that you be on this parole board? What insights do you provide? Because
I
obviously-
believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. Quite often, the
Do you
general.
understand what my just one coming from?
I want to make sure. When you say double-edged sword, are you referring to, because I've been embodied into the institution?
Exactly, yes,
Can I be
yes,
a
yeah.
fair hearing officer?
Yes.
Or would I be biased? Yeah, right.
Yeah. Something maybe similar to the whole polarizing debate we had with ALRB and Ms. Shiroma, you know? You know?
Yes. Well,
reverse. You're Ms. Shiroma in reverse, you know, in the parole.
okay. So my thoughts are, you know, quite
Yes,
often.
Nettie, yes.
Quite often, when the general public looks at a correctional staff member or a warden, they look at the warden as, well, he or she is a person that's a lock them up and throw away key type person, and that doesn't believe in rehabilitation. And the position is quite different than many think. There's been many times where I've had to evaluate, had to be a fair, impartial hearing officer, whether I'm in the classification committee, and I'm looking at releasing an individual from administrative segregation. I had a past position as the chief of classification services, where I've sat on the departmental review board hearings where I evaluated offenders going into and coming out of the security housing unit facilities. So I had to be fair and impartial in dealing with those individuals. I couldn't be a person that's just biased, because it wouldn't work. That's when the lawsuits come. That's not my personality. I pride myself on having integrity, and I've applied that to all my positions. So I think I'm going to be a great hearing officer because of that experience. I guess I'll stop there, but
I say this because, given the fact that the governor has appointed you, nominated you, you're in a unique position given the breadth of experience, years, knowledge that you've accumulated over several decades, you know, working with corrections until recently as you know, as the warden. Yes. Of San Quentin. And when we look at this, not in a bifurcated or siloed, compartmentalized way, but organically, we don't want folks who don't belong on the street harming community. And at the same time, we see what the circumstances are that drive certain people, and then the judiciary branch and the prosecutorial branch, and then you're there because you're the receiver. You know, you are the receiver. You know, how they got there is not your decision. You know that you have to house them and take care, manage, you know, everybody, your administrative staff, CCPOA, psychologists, psychiatrists, everyone, from soup to nuts, you know, the whole thing. And then the safety of the prisoners, the safety of the workers, And hopefully, when you send them off, hopefully they're not coming back, you know, and we know what the recidivism rate is in the aggregate. So, you know, this is something that we collectively do, work together, the parole board, the administration, the members of the legislative branch, both Democrats as well as Republicans. And, you know, how do we make sure we can lower the recidivism rate for those who are deserving, obviously for those who we believe, you know, you just don't open the door, I understand that. For those who we believe have a really good shot with the wraparound supported services to make sure that they land, and it's going to be bumpy and rocky, but they don't veer off too far this way or that way to make sure they end up back, you know, into the system, because as we know, it costs so much money. It crushes and destroys families, tears them apart. We know what will happen with young men in particular who are fatherless. You know this. You know, you've seen it. You've seen it time and again. I just believe that you're in a very unique, you know, situation given your position, and how you use your power and authority will be very important to, I think, to California. You know, I really do mean it. I really do mean it. You know, not coming in with a set, rigid mindset that it's already preordained what the decision making is going to be. To peel all the layers and the nuances and the complexities of this human being and all the circumstances that got him, you know, into the system to begin with, you know. So I appreciate you answering the questions. I'm going to ask folks who are in support of today's nominee, Mr. Chappelle, to come on up. Those who are in support of the nominee, Mr. Kevin Chappelle.
Having been here before, I'm realizing I talk very fast.
And you're going to give us a synopsis of that right there?
Yes.
Okay, a synopsis of that page, okay.
Thank you, Senators. My name is Vanessa Nelson Sloan. I'm the Director of Life Support Alliance. We're a nonprofit advocacy for life-term prisoners and their families, and our mission has been to expand it to include those determinate sentence prisoners who now come under youth and elder parole as well. We have frequently spoken at these hearings, voicing our support or opposition for a candidate based not on emotion or hearsay, but on fact, after research and attending hearings and reading transcripts, and also speaking with individuals who have interacted with the appointee during their professional capacity. And such was the case in this instance. Our members have attended several of Commissioner Chappelle's hearings. We've read transcripts of a good many others, and we've had the opportunity to speak with many individuals who have worked with him during his many years at CDCR. On the whole, we support his confirmation, as we have found him to be reasonable and attentive during hearings and without a preset agenda. And he comes with modest but favorable comments from others within the CDCR system, including some inmates who interacted with him during his years in custody and also as the warden at San Quentin. In fact, one that I saw at Mule Creek 2 weeks ago told me Mr. Chappelle was a really good guy. We appreciate his understanding of prison politics and culture, which oftentimes defies logic, but nonetheless is a contributing factor to the behavior and attitude of many prisoners and thus affects their parole chances. And he is courteous and respectful to all parties in the parole hearing, which is not to say that we don't have some concerns. Mr. Chappelle seems to have found his sea legs, as it were, but some of his early hearings were a bit rough and exhibited areas that still appear and still cause us concern. In particular, Commissioner Chappelle habitually interrupts prisoners when they are answering questions, and while we understand the need to keep the hearings on track, this is a practice that makes it difficult for the inmates to present a cogent presentation, and is also a sign of impulsivity, which is not a good thing in inmate or commissioner. We believe all parties would be better served if he were to read collateral documents more thoroughly prior to the hearing and developed a greater understanding of how mental defect and disability impacts an inmate's ability to respond both to programming and at the parole hearing, and also the utility and impact of longer parole denial lengths on a prisoner's resolve to continue programming. But, to borrow phraseology from the parole hearings, we believe Mr. Chappelle's positive factors outweigh his negative factors, and thus we are in support of his confirmation on this, his initial consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other folks in support of today's nominee, Mr. Chappelle? Seeing no other folks in support. Those in opposition? Seeing no opposition, can I get a motion? We have a motion made by Ms. Leyva. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senators Berryhill? Berryhill, aye. Leyva? Leyva, aye. Mitchell? Mitchell, aye. Canella? Canella, aye. De Leon?
Aye.
De Leon, aye.
Mr. Chappelle, congratulations. You pass on a unanimous vote, 5-0. We wish you the best of luck as you go to the Senate floor. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, we got one last one. I don't think he's going to be controversial at all. Let's bring up Mr. Robert Schmidt. Mr. Robert Schmidt, if you can introduce any loved ones, friends, and we'll go into a brief statement, and then we'll go to any questions or answers or commentaries if the members have any.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce my daughter, Lillian Schmidt, and my colleagues, George Akiyama and Mike Nguyen.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman De Leon and members of this committee for this opportunity. I'm very grateful to the governor for this appointment and look forward to serving as the Chief of Office of Technology Services. As Chief, my primary goals are to improve services while delivering the best value, make government more standardized and efficient for California and its people, and to ensure the data that is entrusted to us. Since my appointment last September, we have expanded our cloud service offerings, increased our customer base, and reduced our rates. There is still more planning and work to be done to continue to improve upon the services we provide to the people of California. There are many initiatives underway, but for sake of time, I'll highlight just 3 of my top priorities. Security. Require our citizens to give us their personal and sensitive information. I'm responsible for securing that information at the data center. Reliable services. Each day, our Office of Technology Services is bringing government services directly to our citizens. Third, innovation. Through educating our workforce, collaborating with our customers, as well as partnering with the Silicon Valley, we are keeping up with current technology and sharing that back with our customers. Finally, I believe in responsibility and accountability. If there's a problem with the Office of Technology Services, I'm responsible and ultimately accountable. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmidt. Questions, commentaries from the members? I see none from Ms. Leyva. Mr. Berryhill is good. Mr. Vice Chair. Ms. Mitchell? Questions or commentaries? No?
I would have delightful conversation all about the Cal Cloud and any number of other resources and supports available to Californians online that I was embarrassed to say I didn't know about. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mitchell. You seem like a very exciting candidate. I watched how you sat there through the nominations of the other individuals, so you had me at that right there. Yeah. So with that, can I entertain a motion? We have a motion. Oh, that's right. Those who are in support of today's nominee, Mr. Schmidt, I'm seeing no support for you right now. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Those who are in opposition, no opposition. Ms. Leyva, I don't know if you had a question or commentary. None. You're good. Okay. With that, we do have a motion made by Mr. Berryhill. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senators Berryhill? Berryhill, aye. Leyva? Aye. Leyva, aye. Mitchell? Aye. Mitchell, aye. Canella? Aye. Canella, aye. De Leon?
Aye.
De Leon, aye.
Mr. Schmidt, congratulations. You passed on a 5-0 vote. Thank you very much. Thank you. You came very well prepared. You came very well. So I'm going to ask folks if they could be so kind enough to leave the room. We're going to go into an executive session right now. Thank you so much.